Welcome to CBS News. I'm Robert Costa, the chief election and campaign correspondent. Joining us today for a conversation is former Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers. He has a lot of experience in the House of Representatives, served as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, also a former FBI agent, served some time in Chicago during that part of his career. Now he's part of LEAD as a founder of a nonprofit advocacy group, working on different issues on foreign policy, national security, and politics. Congressman, really appreciate you spending some time with us here at CBS.
Robert, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You are out of Congress, but certainly in the political arena, thinking about a possible political future. What about a 2024 run for president?
Well, yeah, I've spent the last 7 years as a businessman in the tech space, primarily cybersecurity, but working with quantum computing and AI. And through that experience, and then I look back at my government experience, there is a lot we can do to modernize the government. And one day, my wife and I got up, we were having a cup of coffee, and we said, something's broken. I mean, nothing feels right. And the people that we've met over the last 12 months are really politically discouraged. They're thinking that maybe politics doesn't work anymore, the government doesn't work anymore. So that's why we founded LEAD. Could we have a better, more hopeful, optimistic message about who we are as Americans? And could we create real solutions to really hard problems? And so, Robert, that's taken me to New Hampshire and Iowa and South Carolina, and I've met a lot of folks. And so we're obviously we're kicking some tires, and we're thinking, is this the right thing to do to bring a different kind of perspective to the 2024 race? And we'll probably know within a few months if that's the right decision.
Have you set a firm timeline for yourself about a decision?
Not a firm timeline, but we think maybe late spring, early summer is the right time to do it. Everyone else is going to get kicked off by then, and that would probably be the right time if you are going to jump into the race.
So we're thinking about May or June for you to make a decision?
May or June sounds about right.
So you're not maybe angling to be in that first debate this summer. You're taking your time to think it through.
Well, I mean, obviously, this is nobody should be Pollyannish about jumping into something as monumental as running for president of the United States. And so what we've been doing, Robert, is just the last few months talking to real people with real issues about inflation and jobs and the economy and what in God's green earth is happening internationally. It looks like everyone's flicking us in the head. And talking about all those issues. And I think we need a little more time to see if they are ready, voters are ready, in places that matter for a different kind of a conversation. So far, we've been really pleasantly surprised. So if we get in that first debate or don't, that won't be the determinant for us to make that announcement.
When you were making these visits to early voting states, I think back to Jimmy Carter when he first ran for president in the 1970s. Some people in Iowa and New Hampshire, they'd go, Jimmy who? If they go, Mike who, what do you say? What's your very short introduction about who you are and why you're thinking about running?
America needs something different, number one. Very rarely do you have a candidate who has been experienced in fixing tough problems in the federal government, as well as business experience, solid business experience in the new generation of jobs. Wouldn't it be great if we could combine that person and get them into a candidate? Candidly, I think that's exactly what gets me in the door. And people are inviting me back, more importantly, to hear the solutions. So it's not just that, it's, hey, are you ready for hard solutions? Are we ready to have conversation? Are you tired about sugar high politics where people are just poking each other in the eye to get Facebook likes and Twitter followers? Are we ready to be bigger than our problems here in America? Because we've got some big ones. And what we're finding is people are reacting well to saying, yeah, let's come in, let's have this conversation. It's refreshing.
Where would you fit if you decided to jump into the race in the Republican Party? You have Florida Governor Ron DeSantis moving closer to his own bid. He has called what's happening in Ukraine, the Russia invasion there, the war, a territorial dispute. You have former President Trump as someone who continues to claim he could end that war in one day. He's taken various positions on Russia over the years. You've often been cast as a more traditional Republican hawk. Is that a fair characterization?
Well, if you're asking if I believe in defending the peace in the world, I absolutely do, and engagement's important. And one of the reasons that worries me about the candidate pool that we have today is the lack of understanding of the complexities of our national security threats. not only from just cyber, but from now the militarized space. By the way, I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party and Russia, and Iran is seeking to do the same thing. And these comments where it's not well thought through about what's happening and how the world is changing under our feet, and how those players want to be the dominant players in the future. They want the United States to be subordinate. That's just not what brought us the largest middle class and a free society that gets to make their own determination about their future. And so those things are at risk, and you can't do it by a knee-jerk reaction like I have witnessed with some of these candidates. Remember, just in the last month, the Chinese have flown a spy balloon completely over the country, over sensitive sites. The Russians have downed in international airspace a drone. The Iranians fired suicide drones and killed 5 Americans, deliberately targeting them in Syria. Those are flick in the foreheads, Robert, that Americans can see, and they know something's wrong. And if we do this knee-jerk, let's hide under our desks policy, we're going to lose out in our ability to have prosperity here at home and security here at home. And so people know it, and they know something's wrong. And I just don't think we have anyone articulating, here's how we do this and win. We don't want to come in second place to the Communist Party.
So you say you don't want to see people hiding under their desks. That seems to be a nod toward the non-interventionists in your party who don't want to intervene in different things. So what then should be done? Should there be a U.S. troop presence in the war against Russia alongside the Ukrainians? Should there be an increased military presence in China? What's the Rogers solution to those particular issues?
Yeah, how much do we have today, Robert? I'm happy to go through it. But on the short term, no, absolutely not. You don't want U.S. troops firing at Russians in Ukraine, which is exactly why you have to take the tack to let them empower them, the Ukrainians, fight for themselves. That's an insurance payment so that Putin doesn't go into a NATO country and we do find U.S. troops shooting at Russians. That's a terrible and bad outcome for this. And so that's my point about defending the peace. When you empower a friend to take care of Putin, who has expansionist ideas across Europe, and by the way, remember, he was talking about Ukraine, and then Moldova, and then Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Those are NATO countries, at least the last 3. And so that presents a new type of threat. So you have to be strategic about how you defend the peace around the world and engage with our allies to help contain expansionist theory. Same in China. We've really abandoned the Pacific Rim countries in a way that I think is really not helpful to the best interest of the United States and our economy. So, I prefer cheaper groceries and cheaper gas for families here in America. One way you do that is open up markets for the U.S. in that Pacific Rim that can push back on China. We need our allies in the Pacific Rim pushing back on China. They want to do it. We need to engage them to help them do it. Again, that is insurance so that we don't have U.S. troops shooting at Chinese soldiers, Russian soldiers, and the other problem we're going to have is with Iran. They're also raising their head in an activity that's pretty dangerous for the future of stability in the Middle East.
What about your politics on the domestic front? What kind of Republican are you?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest thing I talk about. So we have China, who is moving out, 3rd largest nuclear arsenal, larger U.S. Navy. They are teaching their 8th graders quantum mechanics. Our 8th grade population in the United States today, Robert, is 2/3 not proficient in reading, 3/4 not proficient in math. You cannot compete with a nation that is quite publicly saying they want to push the United States off the world stage and not educate our children. This is an epidemic. And the good news is I have solutions for this. It's called reading reclamation. We can do it with 6 to 14 weeks on every student. There's a way to do this. And by the way, it's not a new government program. It's through a not-for-profits who are already in this fight. They're in that fight about trying to reclaim reading levels for students. And by the way, if you get high school seniors reading at high school senior level when they graduate, we think it could be a 1.7 trillion jump in the U.S. economy. Why? Think about it. Last year, half of those students couldn't read at the 6th grade level when they graduated high school in America. They can't fill out job applications. they can't fill out, they're having a hard time filling out welfare applications. And so our argument is, can you change that dynamic in a way in a short term to have a major power about educating our public to where they can upskill, do better on their own, buy homes, buy cars, take care of their families? I argue yes, and we can do it in a short term. We just have to have, we have the brain power. Now we just have to have the willpower. And so that's the kind of Republican I'm talking about, that gets out with innovation and creativity to solve these big problems. Everything from Medicare to how we unleash the private sector.
Do you think changes need to be made to Medicare and Social Security?
I think how we change Medicare, I'll give you a great example. We're going to have to, so technology is the last place that the government goes to solve problems. I mean, we have a 19th century design government with 20th century or 19th century tools trying to solve 21st century problems. They're not quite getting it right. They just keep adding departments and adding people every time they pass a bill to help the economy. It means more federal employees. And think about it, the average payment I get in the largest tax bracket in the country is about $5,000. It takes 20 Americans to pay for one federal employee inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. I don't find anybody that thinks they're getting their money's worth there.
What about raising the age of eligibility?
Well, listen, I think we should have to talk about all the things we need to do to make Social Security solvent. But on Medicare, let me go real quickly. One of the things that we can do, again, no cuts, we're going to save money, and we have data-driven results on this. So this isn't some ideological number. If we flip it over and make the government a consumer for the citizens of the United States, not a provider, costs go down and health outcomes go up. And we save a tremendous amount of money. So Medicare Advantage plans already exist. We just need to flip this over. Let them take the control of trying to provide healthcare, providing healthcare, good healthcare, and managing people's health. So in these Advantage plans, let me give you a great example. You stop taking your diabetes medicine, because they're held accountable, these Advantage plans, they actually show up at your house, knock on your door and say, hey, you got to take your medicine. Right? When you're not taking your medicine, you get sicker, you go to the hospital. And so what we found is, in this data-driven application, is that these patients were getting healthier and it was costing less money. So the government doesn't do that. You get sick, they pay X. They don't care about the whole treatment or how that works. They don't care. And so this, I think, is a huge way to save money and get better outcomes. We did the same little study on something with the VA using really high-end technology that allows doctors to make the best decision at the bedside based on all kinds of input that we just don't have today. And so it's not just one doctor's opinion. You got hundreds and hundreds of doctors standing at your bedside. What we're finding is costs go down and readmission rates to the hospital goes way down.
So you have
really benefit. And I think, again, innovation, being bold, acting fast, that's how we compete with China and get our own country back in health.
So if you run, clearly a candidacy would be a big picture focus on competing with China. You'd explore a lot of different ideas on the foreign policy and domestic front. But if you got into the Republican presidential race, you would face former President Donald Trump. So few people right now are willing to take him on directly. Would you be willing to take him on directly in a presidential primary race?
No candidate, declared or not, will determine my decision to get in the race in spring or fall. And whatever candidate that is, I do believe presenting real ideas and innovation will win the day. I think people are tired of that acerbic conversation about politics and name calling.
But how can you avoid the elephant in the room in the race?
Well, listen, this is a really interesting thing, and I know that national pundits don't believe this, but these races are very retail politics oriented, and many people think, well, that's gone now because of all the ways you can communicate digitally, et cetera. But I spent a lot of time with small groups of people just asking them what the future of the country is. And they know what, obviously we're there having big conversations about, new ideas and innovative ideas and how we get the country back on track. And nobody says, hey, what about Donald Trump? Honestly, I've not gotten the question once. I do get it in the national media. And so my argument is I think the people who are going to walk in and pull the lever are in a different place than these big national polls are about where things are. Every day, the former president's numbers go down. I think people are tired of the chaos, the acerbic nature of it. I think they're ready for a calm, steady helm where we actually make progress on issues that we have admired for 10 or 15 or 20 years and never quite can get to a conclusion. I think people are ready for somebody.
If you ran, you would certainly run your own race, it seems. But if he became the nominee, would you support him as the Republican nominee? I'm just trying to understand where you stand on Trump.
Listen, I don't believe today, as I'm sitting here, that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee in 2024. Don't believe it. And so that's my belief. That certainly takes me out and around. He may actually stay in for a while. I just don't think I believe he will be there. His troubles are mounting, his fundraising is waning, and again, I've had people show up with the red hats at different conversations that we're having with something called Lead America. And they end up saying, hey, would you come to my group and talk about this stuff? We haven't heard this kind of conversation. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think the candidate is probably not announced yet that will be our nominee in 2024.
You are a former FBI agent. The former president, as you said, is now facing legal challenges, potentially an arrest, an indictment in New York due to the Manhattan grand jury investigating him over hush money payments made by Michael Cohen, his former fixer. As a former FBI agent, how do you see the prospect of a former president possibly being indicted and arrested?
Honestly, I haven't. I'd like to see the indictment. I haven't read it yet.
Well, he hasn't been indicted.
I know that, but it's my understanding it's printed and aired. Meaning it's already sitting on someone's desk. I think they're going to need to make the Department of Justice. The DA is going to have to make a decision on what is justice and what is revenge and what is punitive, in a sense that doesn't, meet all the standards of Lady Justice being blind. And I think they're going to have hard conversations. If you're going to indict a former president, given the environment of which we are in, my argument is this has to be a better case than certainly I have seen outlined in the press. So that's why I say I'd have to see the affidavit if you were indicted.
You said you told us that you said that you believe the indictment's already drafted. Where did you hear that?
I do believe it's been drafted. Absolutely.
Who told you that?
Listen, I get around. Listen, I just think that it's there. They need to decide if they're going to sign it and stamp it. I think that's where we're at on that whole thing. And I hope they are having second thoughts. I mean, again, there's justice and then there's revenge. And we need to make sure that people have faith in the system from the top to the bottom. And I think this kind of a thing, not done properly, rattles people's faith and it drives people further apart. The last thing we need in America today is to drive people further apart than we already are. I mean, the rest of the world already believes we're kind of on shaky ground. That's why the Chinese went with the Saudis to cut a deal with the Iranians. That's why the president of China shows up with Vladimir Putin and says, we are ready for the next 100 years to be the center of power and global influence in the world. They see that. Now we have to ask every time and every question, we're a big country and we have big shoulders. Is this the right thing to do? And I'm not talking about justice being so blind. I'm talking about justice administered. Is this the right thing to do at this time in our country? I don't know. I'm not sure that answer is yes. Again, if the affidavit says something more than certainly I've seen in the press, that might change my mind. But right today, I just don't think it's the right thing to do. We've got to get America.
How complicated would it be, though, with the FBI having to work with the Secret Service and the NYPD if he was indicted? How difficult would it be to bring in a former president for processing?
Candidly, I don't think it's difficult at all. You make phone calls. You don't send FBI agents kitted up to go in. I don't believe any of that would be appropriate. I think it should happen without under the spotlight. Get him to turn himself in. Listen, when I was an FBI agent, I worked organized crime in Chicago. There were times we called hardened killer gangsters and said, "Why don't you report in? Come through the back door. We'll get you processed." That happens. And so this is not. This would not be hard if I were king for a day. If that in fact happened, it could happen with grace and dignity here, and not be, again. We don't want to be a mockery of the world here. That's really important. So there's a way to do that.
As a former FBI agent, you know crime, you know politics. Should Republicans take any steps on gun control following the latest mass shooting?
Listen, I think there's two huge factors in every case. One, every one of these major shooters have some mental health issue, number one. And number two, we're finding more and more relationships to drugs in these folks. And so there's two things we got to do. Remember, there's 330 million guns in this country. So we can put a Band-Aid on it and give a big hug. There will be another shooting if we don't do anything about these mental health issues. Think of this. In 2021, 1 in 10 teenage girls attempted suicide. We have some mental health strains on this next young generation in a way that I've never seen before. And then you add in it the absolute proliferation of drugs. Now you're having a marijuana psychosis, other things happening with just an absolute blind eye to an illegal drug trade. And it is causing these problems. In the military, you'll see it with suicides, which is just a god-awful thing we must do something about. In the civilian world, you're seeing it with attempted suicides, people who believe that they're going to take their own lives. Oh, and by the way, this last shooting, there was also some drug relation and this notion that they wanted to commit suicide by doing this particular act. It all falls in these patterns. We've seen the patterns. We understand these patterns. My argument is it is time to stop talking about the easy things and start talking about the hard things that got us into these positions. If we don't do that, Robert, we're going to deal with this forever. You can ban every kind of gun that you want to ban. With 330 million guns out on across America, bad guys are getting guns. People who want to do these things will get guns. So now what are we doing? And my argument is it's about time we get serious about these problems in the United States. Again, a lot of this, we can't read when we graduate. We have these high mental health stresses. We have social media, including TikTok, under the influence of the Communist Party, wants our kids to do different kinds of things than they're doing for themselves. It's time we kind of dust ourselves off, as I say, get our heads out of our collective backside in the country and start having hard conversations so we can prepare ourselves to compete with China.
Congressman, after talking with you at length this afternoon, it seems pretty evident you're leaning toward running for president. How likely is it you run?
Well, again, first and foremost, we're going to sit down with our family right at the witching hour. Again, my wife and I started this because we wanted to help change the narrative in American politics in 2024 to focusing on real solutions. We don't have 2 years, 4 years to wait to get ourselves ready and start making the changes we have to do here at home to make sure our economics are right, meaning you get a job and it can pay the bills, and the fact that we have this global competitor in a way we've never faced before in the United States. It was the Soviet Union with money and a lot more clever about how they're implementing their policies around the world. If all that comes together at the right time and we believe Americans are ready for this kind of a conversation, we'll get in the race.
And is it more likely you run for the White House and the Republican nomination versus running for U.S. Senate in Michigan?
Yeah, listen, right now we're spending just about all our time on Lead America that takes us all over the country, and that certainly is our focus. And if you want to have America bigger than her problems, I think the way you do that is by trying to change the national conversation, not a conversation in a single state. I think we have to have a national conversation And again, not be afraid of technology and innovation as we seek to both get people's lives in a better place and, more importantly, get this younger generation believing in America again and that their American dream is still alive and well. We're just going to have to work for it a little bit.
Congressman Mike Rogers, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, former FBI agent, now with LEAD, traveling the country, exploring a possible candidacy. We'll see where that goes. Feel free to break the news on CBS News. Congressman, thank you very much for being with us.
Hey, Robert, thank you so much.